We may not win today, gentlemen, but we'll have a good time.
Well, this one's for Robert Wood. Just, what an amazing name. Well, this is the storage that I built for my gaming room. This is for minis and terrain primarily. I wanted to have a place to put all the stuff that I make or paint or finish, and I wanted it to be able to really grow over time. So if I were to use every single shelf here, it's like a little bit over 400 square feet. It works really well for troops. The size between shelves is about 4 inches for me. I just kind of measured a bunch of the minis that I had and thought that was a good average, that I could get most of my troops and some other models with a little bit of height. But you can see there's a couple of shelves where I kind of just keep a bunch of the taller stuff on it, no matter what army it goes to just be a little bit more organized. The other thing is, boy, you can fit a lot of terrain too. So if you make a bunch of modular terrain pieces, each one of these shelves is, my shelves are 18 inches wide and they're 3 feet deep. So there is a whole lot, especially stuff that you could kind of stack a little bit. You know, if you made a bunch of like rocky kind of outcroppings with foam, you could stack it probably 3 inches high pretty easily, comfortably, and, you know, fill out the whole shelf with it. You'd have a lot of terrain to work with. So let me show you some of the uses that I kind of have for it, or the way that I'm using it, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I built it. Absolutely the most efficient thing I can store on these shelves is like troops. So just rows and rows of troops for days. You could make the height anything you want. Mine is 4 inches between empty space between the shelves. But if all you had were tons and tons of troops, I think about like D&D characters or NPCs and stuff, you could get a ton of storage here. I like keeping the armies together in this way, because then you can kind of pull a shelf and load it under the gaming table. Check out the gaming table video if you're kind of interested in how that works with the gaming table. But that way you kind of aren't transporting the army. You can just kind of pull it and either load it up on the table and wheel it out to play in the living room, or just keep it stored underneath the gaming table while you play, so that as your troops die off or something, you can just pull that shelf out and put them back, and then by the time you're done with the game, you just kind of have the army back on the shelf and you can just put it away. I find it really nice also for, I kind of face the things that are finished, so the things I'm kind of more like display quality, or the things I'm more proud of, finished painting, put in the front. And then if I've still got things that are, you know, in the box that are kind of like my next up to make for that army, or kind of work in progress stuff, I just keep it, you know, in the back of the shelf there. So like over here, the Centurions, I've got like some of their magnetized bits in the boxes back there, but I haven't painted those up yet. So stuff kind of like that. There's a lot of room for I can put another shelf in here if I get more stuff. So that's kind of what I do. Once I fill up all the shelves that I'm using, I just go get another sheet of plywood and break it down into the sizes I need for the shelves. This is nice too, where like if you're playing D&D and somebody's making a character, or they already kind of picked one out, they can, you know, just keep it in the front here so it's easy to get to. Or they, you know, if they're making a new character, they can kind of look for something in the horde here that's pretty representative of what they're trying to go for. And as a DM too, you know, I can kind of keep all the monsters, some of the main kind of monsters that they might run into, elementals and skeletons and kobolds and orcs and goblins and stuff. Be able to pull that and just kind of keep it under the table as well. And then as you're DMing, you kind of have them all there, and that can be maybe a little bit helpful too if you're thinking about wanting to hide what monsters the players are maybe encountering, so they don't know ahead of time, kind of avoiding like some metagaming kind of things. You could just take the whole tray and then just pick out what you already know you're planning on using. It's really good for terrain too. Like this is just all my foliage, bush kind of terrain. It's made out of like lichen stuff and just little foam bases. So on to that. And like a bunch of dungeon dressings. There's just a ton of stuff. This is thinned out a little bit right now because I keep it down at this height because my daughter, I let her play with it. She's been really good about it. And it's her height, so she kind of plays with it at this edge here, and then she can kind of put it away when she's done. And like for terrain too, because then, you know, I've got this whole footprint here for all the village stuff. Either for like an Age of Sigmar game or a D&D game or something, you can just pull the whole village and set it up as you need. So we'll take a step back here and kind of picture what's going on. This is mostly a lot of plywood, and I don't see any way around doing that because of the dimensional stability you'll get from it. These are each one of the supports is just a full sheet. A full sheet of plywood's 4 foot by 8 foot, so the height here is 7 foot and it goes 3 feet back, so I had to rip 1 foot off of the length and the width of the sheet of plywood there for each of those supports. And the middle one is just built up a little bit. I have a little release mechanism there that I can get to underneath there. I had to build around like a water shut off that comes into the house there, so I just had to do that, otherwise it would all be floor to ceiling. I don't have to use all of the space for minis yet, so the chairs for like the D&D sessions for the guys, I just kind of store it in there. For now, if I have to fill this out with minis, I can kind of go tuck those in the utility room or something, but for now they kind of get stuff out of the way. So each of those supports is a sheet of plywood, and then for me, I had to make my shelves 18 inches because when I was planning this out, there's an outlet back here that I didn't want to cover up. And so to miss it, I had to go with 18-inch shelves. If I had to do it over again, I would go for cutting take one sheet of plywood. The shelves are 1/2 inch plywood, and the rest of the supports and the frame and stuff is 3/4 of an inch. But the 1/2 inch plywood for the shelves, I would make it 16 inches, and I would make the whole thing 2 feet deep. That way, one sheet of plywood gets you 2 supports for the 3/4 inch plywood, and then the 1/2 inch plywood you could get, 12 shelves out of each one. So it just would be a whole lot more efficient use of the plywood. I unfortunately am kind of really inefficient, so I kind of use the offcuts for other projects with plywood and stuff, but if I was going to make it, I would think that would be kind of my ideal dimensions, just to make the most use out of the way the sheet goods come. And I think like a 2 foot deep and a 16-inch shelf would also lend itself a little bit better to maybe taking over to a desk or hobby area where you paint. You know, maybe you could make a little rail system underneath a desk or something, a painting desk or a hobby desk as well, and that would work out pretty good. But so if you can, I would go with a little bit altered dimensions from what I did. But whatever you do, the way that I made this work is, there's a good, there, I think the lighting's catching that a little bit better. So these rails, these are just stock boards that are 3/4 of an inch thick. So 1 by stock, but it's 3/4 of an inch. And I ripped them all down into 1/2 inch width. And I just set out to make a ton of these things because there's just an insane amount of shelves, and each one has 4 of these things. You really only need the full length for the bottom one that's supporting the shelves. The top one, I like having this here, so as the shelf comes out, if it tilts up a little bit, it has something to catch. It won't just spill over too much. So like this kind of happens. It's coming out once it gets past the middle point, and it's gonna kind of, gravity's gonna take over and make it tip. Well, nope, it's not gonna go anywhere. It can't go anywhere because of that top rail. So just rip a ton of those things down. and then I made a spacer so that as I was going I could put the spacer in, put a rail on top of it, drill, and then put the screws in, and then put a spacer for between these two rails, and then a spacer for the how much each shelf is spaced out. Each time I did that too, I reversed the way that spacer faced, just so if there was any off, if it wasn't quite square, if it was a little off a square, that would even out as I was going up, and it wouldn't, build up a discrepancy too much by the time I got to the top rails. So once you do that, just make sure that the width you have in between these shelves, I gave it an extra 1/8 of an inch. So I made 18-inch shelves, so the space is 18 and 1/8 of an inch. So if you made 16, go 16 and 1/8 of an inch. And that just gives it enough play that it's not really going anywhere, but it has plenty of clearance to slide really easily, and it's not a problem. That has worked out really good for me. I would, whatever width you go with, I would just give it another 1/8 of an inch, and you should be golden. Now, the way that I got all of this to kind of seat correctly, the supports and everything to keep that spacing, was I used a router, and I just made 3/4 inch wide, essentially dados, and they're only about an 1/8 of an inch deep. But I just meticulously laid those out to be exactly that 18 and 1/8 of an inch, so I knew when I was putting this together that when they sat into those spots, and I kind of support it with braces, but when they seated correctly into those dado slots, I knew that they were exactly that same width apart that I needed for the shelves. And I did that, hope you can kind of see in the light there, in the back, and some along the top, and then the top in the front, and the top in the back. Now I just kind of made this thing also just to fit the wall, so it's just kind of going all the way to the drywall, so there's no way it can kind of tip side to side. If you didn't have that option, I would just take the ones that you make in the back, make one go low in the frame, and make one go up high in the frame, and I would just sink them, find studs, and sink those into the studs. It would not go anywhere for sure. But for me, I didn't have to worry about that. This thing has been fine. Almost all of the load is obviously just going kind of straight down once the shelves are weighted in there. But that would keep it, from slanting or tilting or torsioning or anything like that. So those are kind of some of the main points about how I built it. If you go to make something like this for yourself, by all means, kind of leave a comment. I'll do my best to help you out and explain, give any advice that I can, explain kind of what I did. But it's really pretty straightforward, and like I said, I would go with a little bit altered dimensions just to get more out of the plywood that you buy. But man, have I found it really helpful for storing minis. Now I can just paint away or make a bunch of terrain, and I don't have to worry about, oh, now I've got this done, where on earth am I going to put this in the gaming room? So things are kind of put away. So it's just been incredibly helpful in that regard. Hope you guys enjoy. Hope that if you have the space, you make something like this, that you find it as useful as I did. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.